Hello and welcome everybody to another Tuesday afternoon program with the Genealogy Center. So our speaker today, Ariel, has been working in the preservation industry for over 10 years for Gaylord Archival, where she works to help museums, archives, and conservation professionals to help preserve our cultural heritage. So she developed something called YourStory, which is a collection of archival quality materials that professionals use, but it's meant to make it simple for family historians to preserve their family records, right? And share those with future generations. And she's also a very seasoned speaker. She's done stuff for NYG&B conferences, for FGS, and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm very excited for her to be joining us today. Now, y'all are probably tired of seeing my face, so I'm going to disappear and let Ariel get started.
Hey everyone. All right, we're going to get right into it because I have a lot of info to cover. So as Elizabeth mentioned, I am here from YourStory by Gaylord Archival. My name is Ariel Servadio. And I'm here today to talk to you about preserving documents and photos found in genealogy research. Just a little background on me to recap what Elizabeth just said. I am currently a product marketing manager at Gaylord Archival, and I have worked in the preservation industry for over a decade. I actually just celebrated my 13-year anniversary at Gaylord last week. And a few years ago, I developed the YourStory collection for people just like you. So genealogists, family historians, personal collectors, to be able to use the same archival quality products that professionals at renowned institutions use to preserve our cultural heritage, to preserve your own personal history. And as Elizabeth mentioned, you may have seen me at NERGC, FGS, NYG&B presenting, and I have also presented at Roots Tech. So let's get into it. As you've been doing your genealogy research, you have found all of this stuff, right? Birth certificates, deeds, old letters, newspaper clippings, photos, negatives, slides. Well, what do you do with all of this when you're finding it as you're conducting your research? The first step is, of course, digitization. This is so you can easily search and access these items, as well as digitally preserve them. I want to highlight a few different options you have through Allen County Public Library, which I think is so very cool. I've been told that the Genealogy Center has 4 copier scanners that are available to patrons free of charge, which is amazing. These are great for digitizing documents, and ACPL also partners with VividPix and has a scanning station with 2 ScanSnap scanners, which are great for digitizing photos that also give you free access to VividPix's Restore software, which can help with color correcting old photos, things like that. I was also told that if you donate or loan materials to the Genealogy Center, they will digitize them and you can access them via their free databases. There is a link there, but I know Elizabeth showed you around the website, and I know that that's easy to find. And then I also want to talk about, especially for digitizing at home or on the go as you're conducting research at various institutions or whatever, Google PhotoScan is this incredible free app, and it lets you digitize photos with your smartphone or tablet. It actually guides you through capturing all 4 corners of a photo, which helps eliminate glare and also allows you to create like a flat digital scan of the photo without any distortion. It's super easy to use, and I personally use it all the time. It's really great. And then of course, I want to bring up that, you know, you can purchase your own home scanner. They make specialized ones for photos and negatives, but even a printer combo scanner does a great job for digitizing documents and things, and just allowing you to have that extra level of a digital copy of these important items. But after you've digitally preserved your items, what is next? Well, for those tangible items that you want to make sure that you have and can continue to share with future generations, you want to choose archival quality storage. And these photos are just a few examples of the boxes, sleeves, folders, and other enclosures that you can use for that purpose. And the reason I like to show these photos too is often when we hear the word archival or think of archives, we think of the back room with hundreds of racks of, banker's box style record storage cartons storing all this stuff. But these are storage options that can fit very nicely in your home. You can keep them on your bookshelf so you can access them regularly. It's not necessarily a back room personal archive situation unless that's what you need it to be. And there's also options for storing a lot of different types of materials too. So I talked about archival quality storage, and you may not know what archival quality means. I actually didn't know what the word archival meant when I first started working at Gaylord 13 years ago. And why is it important? Well, as per that handout that Elizabeth shared at the beginning of the session, acid-free is just one piece of the preservation puzzle. And I'm going to go over some of those pieces that are featured on that handout. So acid-free means that the pH of that material is 7 or greater at the time of manufacture. And this is important because acid is a component that can degrade items, and as well as the box that you're trying to store the item in. So having the box itself be acid-free provides a great foundation for lasting storage. Lignin-free is also a component of archival quality storage. So lignin is a component of wood pulp that produces acid and darkens paper. And it's one of the reasons that newsprint turns yellow so quickly. It's also responsible for that great library book smell. That is the smell of lignin. Buffering agents are also a key component to archival quality storage. And it is important to note that not all archival quality storage will be buffered. There's actually specific circumstances under which you would choose buffered versus unbuffered storage. And there is a great resource at gaylord.com/resources that goes over the scenarios. It actually provides like a nice chart of when to choose buffered versus unbuffered. It has to do with the content of the material you're storing. Plant-based materials are safe to store in buffered storage, but you want to store anything that could be animal-based, like leather, wool, silk. Those items you want to store in unbuffered materials. But the buffering agent in buffered storage is added to help further neutralize acid from items being preserved. So we talked about the storage box itself being acid-free, but then also consider that you're putting a piece of paper that very likely also contains acid into that box. So that buffering agent will help mitigate some of that damage from the acid that's naturally inherent within the item you're preserving. There's many other pieces to the puzzle: safe adhesives, pH neutral, that don't contain damaging chemicals, they don't yellow and turn brittle over time, or conversely become extra sticky and ooze and potentially come into contact with the items that you're trying to preserve. Passing the photographic activity test, which is a specific test ensuring materials are safe for storing sensitive photos. Inert plastics. So this is important for any plastics used in preservation. They're not just your average old plastic like PVC. In fact, they're definitely not PVC, as you can see. Plastics that are safe to use in preservation are inert, meaning they don't contain any harmful chemicals that will off-gas or deteriorate over time. A really good rule of thumb with plastic is if you can smell it, it is not safe for archival storage. So a great example that I can give for this is like if you think about the way a pool floaty smells, like it has kind of a strong plastic scent when you first open it and are blowing it up. Luckily, we don't use those for archival storage, and anything that smells like that, you don't want to use for archival storage because that material itself can degrade on its own, and it can also damage what you're putting inside of it. UV protection. Many archival boxes are either designed to be opaque to provide damage from light, or there are UV filtering materials used. So for example, a frame for archival quality storage will have either UV filtering acrylic or maybe glass with a UV filtering film to help prevent whatever you are displaying in the frame from being damaged by light over time. The thickness of materials plays a component because various thicknesses can provide additional structural support to fragile items. And then the construction of archival enclosures. So as depicted in this illustration, those metal edges are a hallmark of archival quality storage, but they're not just to make them look cool, even though I do think they look really nice with those metal edges. They also are very structurally significant. They provide a lot of strength. They also endure. So the metal edges provide a connection in a box that stands the test of time and makes those enclosures safe for you to keep things in for generations to come. And then there's also design features of archival quality materials that minimize damage during storage and handling. So this example is going to come up later when we're talking specifically about documents and photos, but a key design feature that I feel like is very archival focused is a drop front box, meaning one edge of the box doesn't have metal edges, which allows that flap to come down so you can slide out documents versus having to reach in and lift them out and potentially damage them in the process. If that's confusing, don't worry, you'll see an example of it later. Finally, archival quality products that Gaylord Archival makes meet or exceed the specifications required by renowned institutions like the Library of Congress and the National Archives. So a way to think about this is when you're preserving grandma's wedding dress in a box from us, you are using the same quality material as what is storing Ruth Bader Ginsburg's descent collar at the National Museum of American History. As mentioned with YourStory, the whole idea behind it was to bring these high quality products that professionals are using to preserve our cultural heritage to preserve your own personal history, which is just as important. So something that archival quality materials don't contain is harmful additives that could damage the object stored inside them. I mentioned the stinky plastic. That's just one example of reactive chemicals that can be contained within items that could actually do more harm than good when you are trying to store something to make it last. Finally, it is important to know that archival quality is not a regulated term. So unfortunately, this means that it can be applied to products that are found in craft stores or other stores that just don't meet this criteria that I mentioned and tend to just be acid-free, which, as we know, is just one component of archival quality storage. So when you are at a Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something like that, and you're looking for an album or a box, if you're, choosing to buy there, make sure if it says archival quality that there are other specifications on the label that mention the things that I just highlighted to indicate that the product is truly archival quality. Acid-free is great and it's a step in the right direction, but it is not the whole picture and it does not guarantee safe long-term storage for your items. So there is that infographic again that Elizabeth shared at the beginning of the presentation. And I also just want to mention that it is downloadable. It is a PDF. You can print it. And you can also request printed copies from us if you need by emailing customerservice@gaylord.com. This is great so that when you are shopping for materials for storing your collections, you can have this. Now that we know what archival quality is, let's get into it. Document preservation. So you found all these documents in your genealogy research. What are you going to do with them? Some of these documents might include deeds, birth certificates, marriage certificates. And the thing is they provide really important clues to our history, the history of our region, an organization, a family, an individual, but they exist on this incredibly fragile material that we have to try to stop from deteriorating. Protecting these documents is essential to saving history. So how do we start? Well, we first start with clean hands. All you need is to wash and thoroughly dry your hands to prevent the transfer of dirt, oils, and other contaminants to important documents. And this is a time to not apply any lotion or cream to your hands. Save that for when you're done handling sensitive documents. As much as it might make you feel like a professional archivist or conservator to wear gloves, gloves are really not necessary if your hands are clean. And in fact, we really don't recommend them because wearing gloves can affect your dexterity and cause you to potentially damage especially fragile or friable, which means crumbling documents. So wash your hands when you get started. If something happens and you feel like your hands are dirty and you want to continue, just wash your hands again, wait for them to dry, and you can continue working with these documents. But I would leave off the gloves for document handling. You're also going to, when looking at documents that you want to preserve, you want to remove extraneous materials. So things like rubber bands, paper clips, and other types of fasteners can actually damage documents because of their own inherent ability to deteriorate. Rubber definitely deteriorates over time. We see that with it getting brittle, but it can also stick to items. Paper clips can rust. So we don't want the thing fastening the item to do more damage to what we're trying to preserve. The other thing is if what that fastener is holding is a material that is relevant to the document you're preserving. Some examples could be like pressed flowers or newspaper clippings or a photo. You just want to set them aside so you can place them in their own enclosure to preserve with the document itself. And just another note on newspaper clippings, as I mentioned about newspaper yellowing quickly. Newsprint is bad news. It's a very poor quality paper and it's highly acidic. It was never designed to last. It was designed to be a cheap and effective way to print large volumes of paper on a daily basis to deliver the news. So because of that, its potential to degrade is very high because of its acid and lignin quantity. And so you want to make sure that when storing newsprint, you want to keep it separate from the other document that you're storing. So its acid does not migrate into the document that you're storing. So you could see in that video, I just slipped it into a sleeve. And then now that it's in a sleeve and enclosed on its own, it can be placed with the original document to store. Something that I'll talk about again a little bit later, but you can also put in a piece of archival tissue or archival bond paper in that sleeve with the newsprint, especially if you don't need to view both sides of it. So to help mitigate some of that acid migration that happens. So taking into consideration those more special situations, now you want to overall assess your collection of documents to help you choose what primary enclosures you're going to use to store. And you want to choose them based on the expected use and the overall needs of what you're preserving. So questions to ask yourself are things like, how will your collection be used? How often will you be accessing it? Are you the only person that's going to access it? Or maybe other members of your family or other people you know will be? Or even, are you preparing these documents to donate to an institution that will later be accessing it? And then finally, what is the condition of the documents you're preserving? There's a big difference between newer documents that are in good condition that you just want to keep in the condition that they're in versus very old documents that are fragile, and how you want to treat them. So if you have a large collection of documents that you need to store safely and efficiently and cost effectively, the best solution is storing multiple documents in a paper enclosure, like a file folder or an envelope, in document boxes or record storage cartons. And this is, as I said, the most economical solution. And also, you can store multiple documents in a single folder. When you are doing that, you want to consider interleaving, which means putting something in between them so they don't come into contact with themselves. So as you can see in this video, I had multiple pages that I'm storing in a single folder, and I put a sheet of archival quality tissue in between them, aka interleaving. The general rule of thumb when you're storing multiple documents in a single enclosure is about 10 documents per folder, or I should say up to 10 documents per folder. However, you want to keep in mind that the more fragile or valuable the documents are, the fewer you should put in a single folder. Now, you've heard me mention primary enclosures a few times. This is because of this idea and component of archival quality storage, which is that layers of protection provide support. So a primary enclosure is something like a sleeve or a folder, and a secondary enclosure is the box that you then put that folder into. So you want to store more fragile and valuable documents in primary and secondary enclosures. An example of this is putting something in a sleeve, which will allow you to safely handle and view the item, and then putting it in a folder to provide additional structural support as well as protection from light and pollutants before then putting it in a box. So archival plastic sleeves are that inert plastic that I was talking about. And what is great about them is that they don't contain any harmful chemicals, but they also do not have any acid absorbing properties. So like I mentioned with the newsprint, putting a sheet of archival tissue or bond paper with the document you're preserving in the sleeve with it will help absorb the acid of that document and just decrease the damage that that acid is doing to the document before you then put it in a folder for additional protection. Now, a big rule of thumb in archival storage, and this comes up with many materials that we want to preserve, is that fragile equals store flat. So if you are supporting your items with a stiffer material like folder stock, it's possible to store them upright in a document storage box or record storage carton, and that does allow, easier access and filing, organizing large amounts of documents, labeling by, a certain date or event. That storage method is very ideal for that, but you just want to keep in mind that if you are storing paper vertically, you want to use spacers or dividers if the box is partially filled, and that will prevent sagging. So you can see this record storage box is nearly empty, but I just inserted some spacers to help keep the folders that are in there upright so they don't sag or bend and then potentially damage the item that's inside of them. You also want to keep in mind that particularly fragile documents should be stored flat. So we talked about design elements that equal archival quality storage, and this video helps illustrate that. This is what's called a drop front box. And as you can see, it allowed me to really easily slide the document out of the box versus reaching and lifting in. This example is pretty unique because I'm storing a single document in a kind of large box. There would likely be several documents in this box. And again, the drop front makes it easier to remove all of those to then access them versus reach in and potentially damage edges or bend things. So you want to choose flat storage for particularly large or fragile documents. And I've talked a lot about sleeves, and you've seen the inclusion of using plastic as an extra measure for preservation in documents. And what's great about using archival quality plastic sleeves is that it allows you to handle those documents without getting, oils from your fingertips or just any potential damage from rough handling. Like that adds an added level of protection for that, as well as allowing you to view the front and back of the document. But lamination is not necessary. So if you seal your document between two sheets of polyester, that can actually accelerate deterioration because now the acid has nowhere to go. When I first started working at Gaylord Archival, a product manager said something that left a huge impression on me, which was, once you laminate a document, you can pour a cup of coffee on it, but you will also never be able to access it or prevent acid degradation again. So an L sleeve or any of the archival plastic sleeves that we've talked about, which, by the way, there is a great resource at gaylord.com/resources on what plastics to choose for preservation. They all have different properties and can meet different needs depending on the size and budget for your project. But a sleeve provides just as much protection as encapsulating by lamination, and also has the added benefit of, as we talked about, you can add a piece of archival quality tissue in there to help with acid degradation. So once you have all of your documents safely stored either flat or vertically in record storage cartons or document boxes, you really want to make sure as you're doing this that you are labeling. Labeling allows safer and easier access for you and for others. And what I mean by that is if your collection is not well labeled and then you later want to access something from it, if you can't tell where it is, that means that you will be unnecessarily handling many items that don't need to be handled just because you're looking for that specific item. So if things are well labeled, it prevents any inadvertent damage from happening while searching for what you're looking for. And I highly recommend creating an inventory list, especially if you have a large collection. It's certainly something that you can print out and keep with the physical collection itself, but I highly recommend starting and maintaining it digitally, through like a cloud-based app like Google Sheets or something like that, where you can access it from wherever you are to also have an idea of what you have. So that is really just the tip of the iceberg with document storage, very high level. And I know I went through it quickly, but the good news that I have for you is that you can find all of the information I just went over and so much more at gaylord.com/resources. We have resources on storing a bunch of different types of documents, newspapers, maps, and a video that goes over everything that I've just said. So if this was overwhelming, don't worry, you can access the information again later. But now we're going to move on to photo preservation because I'm pretty sure you all have a lot of photos. So you've digitized your photos. Now what do you do? Well, the first step is assessing your collection of photos, as we did with documents, to help you figure out the best choice for storing your photographs. You have to know what you have so you can figure out the right storage solution for you. So here's how you get started. When you are assessing your collection, you want to create an inventory list, and that includes listing out the photo formats, the sizes, the quantities, and the condition. So when I'm talking about condition, you can see here, there's damaged prints, photos that have been cut, things like that. This is all good to make a note of, so you just have an idea of what you have to preserve. And you're going to want to separate any damaged or very fragile photos from the rest of your collection. This is because they might need to be stored differently, or you may even want to have them assessed by a conservator at a later time before storing them. And most importantly, please do not attempt first aid, okay? So listen to Joan Collins, no Scotch tape ever. Scotch tape and other adhesives that are not archival quality can turn yellow and brittle. Not only do they stop doing the job you wanted them to do, which was hold something together, they can actually stain and cause further damage to the item that you stuck them to, in this case, a photo. So if you do ever need to mend a photo, you definitely want to use an archival quality tape or adhesive, but ultimately try not to make those decisions on your own. find a conservator in your area or try to contact an expert to determine what efforts you need to take towards repairing that photo before you do anything. That's why you want to set it aside so you can evaluate that later. When you're assessing your collection, you also want to assess the value of your photographs. This is going to help you in setting your priorities and your budget. So think about things like, are these photographs unique? Do I have negatives so that I can make duplicates if I need to? And are any of these prints valuable as works of art or historical documentation? You then want to determine your resources. So being realistic about your budget and your storage space can help you find the best solution for your specific needs. You want to make copies of particularly unique or important images. High resolution scans will allow you to print, share, and frame your photos while keeping the original safely stored. So if you found an incredible photo of your great grandmother that you're like, I want this as art in my home, I want to be able to look at it every day, I highly recommend getting a high resolution scan, putting that original photo in a sleeve or a folder and storing it safely, and framing the scanned photo. This allows you to still enjoy it every day, but not damage the original photo, because if you do irreparable damage to it, then you lose that image and memory forever. You also want to anticipate the frequency that your photos are going to be handled. So thinking about, are you going to want to view these photos frequently? Do you want to create an album that maybe you pull out at the holidays every year and look at with family? Or are you just trying to store them safely so that you'll be able to eventually view them in the future? And when you're considering a project like this, especially with photos, because many of us have hundreds, if not thousands of them, you want to determine the time that you have available to invest in the storage project, and you need to be honest with yourself about it. Are you short on time and you just want to get the photos out of that disintegrating shoebox they've been in for 75 years? Or are you planning on embarking on thoroughly organizing and storing your collection? And the thing is either option is great because you're taking a step in the right direction of making those photos and memories last. Even if you don't have time to do a thorough, organized project, and you just want to rehome things from a bad storage situation to a better one, you are now putting those photos in a place where they can later be evaluated for a more thorough, organized project in the future. So once you've done all this assessment, it brings us to a tale of two storage options, which is albums or boxes. Both are great options for photo storage, and you'll likely use a combination of them when you're storing photos. It also depends on how you want to organize your collection, depending on what you choose. So some photos may warrant an album because you want to share them and they are particularly significant, but maybe you've got like 1,000 pictures of your baby laying naked on a blanket that might be suited for more discreet storage. Or maybe you keep one of those photos in an album and then put the other 999 in a box, you know. These are the types of choices that you'll make in choosing your storage. So when we talk about scrapbooks and albums, these are what is ideal for storing and sharing photos. So when you want to regularly view photos, albums are certainly the best option. You can keep them organized and safe, but still regularly peruse them, share them with others while keeping photos safe from grubby hands and rough handling with the page protectors that are in albums. Some examples that I can show you here. We have a great product that this is a preservation box album, but you could do this with any type of album, but we have photo pocket pages of really almost every size. So you can store tons of photos of different sizes in one place. So if you just need to quickly get photos in an album, but you still want to be able to look at them, this is an excellent and efficient option for doing that. If you have a bunch of photos that are all the same size, we also have pre-bound photo albums, so you don't necessarily have to create your own, but I know, especially depending on the age of your collection, that it's very likely that you've got images of a lot of different sizes. Oh, and this is also where your inventory list really comes in handy, because if you have made a list while you're assessing your collection, it can help you figure out what you need to buy before being like immersed in the project as you're doing it. If you're feeling more creative and you have a little more time on your hands, and you want to include photos of varying sizes with notes, using a scrapbook or an album with archival quality mounting pages and photo corners is a perfect solution. You can write captions directly on the pages using an archival quality pen or pencil, and you can also easily remove the original photos from the photo corners. They don't adhere to the pages, so it's great for also still being able to easily access the originals, but having kind of a nicer presentation of them. The one thing I want to make sure that you keep in mind is this is definitely a more time-consuming solution. There's a lot of planning that goes into how you want to display your photos of different sizes, if there's any other materials you want to include with the photos, and what you're going to write about the photos. But this is a great solution for when you're really trying to tell a story with this particular album. So if you want to document like a very important family vacation or some moment that was really crucial to your family's history, and you want to make sure that there's adequate information about what's being captured in the photos, this is a perfect solution for that. And if you are just looking to get a ton of photos that you have that you're maybe not even sure if people really want to see, but you don't want to be the one that makes that decision, you want to keep them safe so that those decisions could be made in the future, you can use storage boxes. These are just a few examples of different boxes we have for storing photos, but putting photos in boxes is more than just tossing them all in a box, slapping on the lid, and throwing them in the basement. There's still steps that you want to take so that when you do look at these photos again, they are still in good condition. So this is where primary enclosures comes up again. Archival plastic sleeves are great for easy viewing. They allow you to still handle the photo safely. And if someone wrote captions on the back, which often happens with older photos, it allows you to still see what's written on the back too. If you've got a lot of photos that you need to store, or photos that are not as important to be able to access as regularly, paper envelopes and sleeves are ideal for those. Duplicates are a great example. I come from the era of double and triple copies of photos when you would get your film developed. And maybe you don't want to get rid of those duplicates because there's a family member that you might want to give the original to in the future, but you don't necessarily want to display it with the rest of your collection. So you can stick those in envelopes, and it's more economical to store them that way. The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing photo storage is that you want to match the box to your photo size. So this is so photos don't slide around in the box and potentially damage their edges or corners. This product that we're featuring here is a shoebox style photo storage kit, and that is a nod to the shoeboxes of photos that you have in your basement and whatnot. But this is a different shoebox because it's archival quality, and we have it in a few different sizes so that it's perfectly sized to the type of photo that you're storing, without it, sliding around, bumping into the edges, etc. So just like we talked about with document storage, with photo storage, it still rings true that fragile equals store flat. This also includes large photos. So when you are storing photos flat, this is an example of that drop front coming in handy again for safe removal. But you also want to think about if you're going to store multiple prints in one box, one, make sure that they are either in their own enclosures or they are interleaved with an archival quality material. And two, you want to start with the largest prints at the bottom, then to smallest, to avoid damaging the smaller photos. So if you're storing an 8x10, then you could do a 5x7, then a 4x6, but not the other way around. And if you have thousands of photos, which often happens if you're the unofficial guardian of your family history, which I'm sure many people attending this are, where you just have family members giving you boxes of photos from various other family members to keep safe. You might want to consider high capacity storage boxes. We have a kit that contains a box that has 4 organizing quadrants with archival quality envelopes. And these envelopes still allow you to label and sort photos based on different occasions or events or moments in time, but it allows you to store 1,700 photos up to 4x6 in size with negatives in one box. So this is a great solution if you're like, I just have to do something about all these photos I have, but I don't have time to like really artfully organize them or display them. The high capacity kit is a great solution for that. As with our documents, this applies to both photos, documents, really any type of material that you're trying to safely preserve in your home. You want to let them live with you. So do not store items that you just preserved in the attic or the basement. And I know it is tempting because those are the areas of our home that are specifically designed for storage, but they undergo large fluctuations in temperature and humidity that can damage photos and documents. So you do want to store them in a closet in an interior room of your home or under the bed. And think about the fact that your preference for a stable temperature and humidity level is also ideal for your photos and documents. So any paper storage, large fluctuations in humidity and temperature can cause damage. So if you're comfortable, then they are well preserved. And it doesn't have to be on a bookshelf as we're showing here. Like I said, a closet or a closet or under the bed, just not in the attic or the basement. So again, I know that was a ton of information that I just went over, but I want to remind you that you can find all of it in our free research center at gaylord.com/resources. You can get even more in-depth knowledge on document and photo storage than what I just covered, but you can also get guidance on preserving a ton of other types of materials. I know we've got a video on wedding dress preservation, family Bible storage, newspaper preservation. There's tons of information there to help you. But that being said, if there are more questions that come up that we don't cover in the Q&A or that you can't find in the Research Center, you can also contact me at ariel.servadio@gaylord.com. I will throw that slide up again in a minute. And you can also contact our customer service department at customerservice@gaylord.com. Our customer service reps are incredibly knowledgeable. They all undergo archival training and they can really help you with these solution-based questions too. So never hesitate to reach out to us as well. And then to thank you for attending my presentation today, I want to offer you a discount code for 20% off all preservation products and kits. Just use code ACPL22. And this is valid through the end of this year to give you lots of time to pursue all of your preservation projects. So please don't hesitate to use that. I will throw up my contact info slide again. And I am ready for questions.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. All right, there are many questions that we can take a minute to go through.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you wanted to turn your video on, you don't have to, but.
Oh, I do. I'm just having trouble figuring out how to do it.
Okay, that's fine.
Just give me 1 second.
There are a number of questions in here that are very similar. So I'm going to try to group some of the questions together. I'm going to preface this Q&A session by saying, if we don't get to all of your questions today, feel free to send Ariel an email, feel free to send us an email. Additionally, if you would like a copy of the chat, which a lot of links have been put into the chat throughout this program, send us an email. Our email is genealogy@acpl.info, which I'm going to put that in the chat really quick. All right. So
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
I was looking on a different screen and I was like, I don't see the button to turn on my video. That's where it was. Okay.
It's a problem when you have like a lot of screens and a lot of monitors.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, there.
Great. So the first question I'm seeing is, how do you flatten old rolled up documents?
So my answer is very carefully, and maybe depending on the document, you may want to contact a conservator before you embark on this, but we do sell various types of weights for helping flatten documents, also presses and things like that. So it really depends on what the document is, but there are items that you can use to do it, but I would just say proceed with caution, and read up on it as much as you can before doing it, just so you don't potentially cause any further damage.
Great. So there are a couple of people who are saying that they have large quantities of photos, especially photos that are roughly around the same size. Like one person I'm seeing is looking for a way to store a lot of 8x10s. Another person mentioned that they have thousands of 5x7s. So what would you say would be the most like cost-effective way to store a large quantity of photographs like what I'm describing?
So cost effective would definitely be if you're not looking to also be able to like easily view and share them, definitely storing in boxes. And we have several different sizes of photo storage kits. So like the shoebox style kits, I think can hold 100 photos roughly, and we have those in a few different sizes of photos. Unfortunately, the high capacity kit we only have in 4x6 right now. So it would be for 4x6 or anything smaller. But if that being said, if you have larger photos that you still need to store and you have a large volume of them, kind of going over what we talked about for document storage, you can use sleeves or folders. And when I say sleeves too, they can be paper sleeves, which are going to be more economical than plastic, and put them in record storage cartons, document boxes, or even flat print boxes. So where you're still storing them flat, but you can fit many photos in a single box as long as they are either in their own enclosure or interleaved.
Okay. So there were a couple people asking questions about displaying an item. What is the best way to do that? There's one person who specifically asked about putting in a frame a newspaper article without it yellowing more, because that acid. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about displaying stuff like that?
So my initial
Safely?
recommendation, oh, sure. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But so my initial recommendation would be what I did mention, which is if ideal and if you can, the best case scenario is to make a high resolution copy of the item and safely preserve the original, in a folder, in a box somewhere, and then actually frame and display that. If you are really strongly sure that you want to display the actual newspaper article itself, there are archival quality frame kits and framing materials that you can use for that. So you want to make sure that you're using an archival quality backer board. You want to use museum quality or archival quality mat board. Museum quality mat board actually contains no paper. It's cotton rag based. And then there's conservation quality paper-based mat board that has all of those elements we talked about with archival quality. It's acid and lignin free. So you want to use those components to build your frame. And then you also want to make sure that you're using a UV filtering form of glazing, whether that is glass or acrylic. Acrylic widely comes in UV filtering, so that would probably be your best option. But also try not to hang it in a room where the sun is going to beat directly on it. Like newspaper is just so fragile that I really hesitate
Yeah.
with that. But but that would be your best option if you're going to frame the original newspaper clipping.
To kind of just add something to that, my personal librarian thoughts is if it is so fragile that you can't scan it, you probably should not be trying to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would agree with that too.
Food for thought. Speaking of things that are fragile, that maybe we ought to leave alone. Somebody was saying that they have their grandfather's World War II photo album, scrapbook, and the photographs he took and developed are contact prints, and they're glued to the paper. Is it best to disassemble the scrapbook to digitally scan the photos?
So this is a question I get a lot, and it is a tricky answer. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Again, I highly recommend, consulting an expert at a local institution or a conservator for the best answer. But generally, if depending on the age, from World War II, I feel like there's a good chance that the adhesive is trying to remove it is going to really damage the contact prints. So what you're probably going to want to do is preserve the page itself with the contact print still on it. And I don't know if there's anything on the back of like the other side of the page, like if there's another print glued to the other side, but you could make the choice to remove the page in its entirety and put that in its own sleeve, or you could also make the choice to preserve the entire album on its own without removing anything from it, because if that album, the way that your grandfather organized it, is, important to you, you can get a box for the album itself. You can interleave the individual pages with archival quality paper, and that'll at least help with the acid migration from the pages that the photos are glued to. But yeah, that is a tricky situation, but we often do not encourage people to try to remove glued items unless it's very cleanly coming off and it's not, decades old.
Yeah. So so this person is asking a question that I haven't ever heard of this before, but maybe this will sound familiar to you.
All right.
So this lady said that she had heard from another institution's presentation regarding a similar topic, that you don't want to use general scanners on certain older photos. She can't remember what type of photograph, because that starts a chemical reaction that can't be stopped and it turns the photos black.
Wow.
I haven't heard of that before.
I am not personally familiar with that either. It does make sense to me, just because I would guess that they're talking about a certain type of photosensitive paper that essentially has not been like fully developed, like that could still be damaged by high intensity light exposure. But unfortunately, I do not have the detail on that, so I don't know the type of scanner or the type of photo that you shouldn't be doing that with.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I can look into it more.
Yeah. My colleague, Kay Spears, who some of y'all who attend our regular programs are probably familiar with Kay, because she does a lot of our programs that are on scanning. If anyone would know the answer to that question, it would be Kay. So I would send us an email and with that question, and maybe we can pick her brain.
And if you could share the answer with me, I would appreciate it, just because I'm curious myself, so I can also let people know about that.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So let's see, moving right along. There are a couple people asking about binders, that they have things that are in binders. One person says that they have some early 1900s church minutes that are in binders. Should those binders be replaced with archival binders, or should they just put the whole binder into a box?
So this is kind of the same question as with the album from World War II.
Yeah.
It depends on if to you the binder itself has historical or important significance. If it's just the pages inside of the binder that are important to you, I definitely recommend removing them from the existing binder, unless there's a way for you to confirm that it is archival quality materials.
Yeah.
but I feel like there's probably a good chance that they're not. And I would put them in an archival quality album instead. But if that binder itself is important in some way, maybe
Yeah.
there's like writing on it or drawing on it or anything that you would also want to preserve, you could either put the whole album, or sorry, the whole binder in its own box, or you could even remove the pages, put them in a safer album, and then separately preserve the binder itself too.
So there were a couple of people who were asking about preventing water damage. And these are people who live in places like Florida and Texas, where they could potentially experience hurricanes and flooding and things like that. They were asking specifically about putting the materials in their archival quality boxes, but then inside something that is waterproof. Thoughts on that?
So I'm a little conflicted. I do understand the desire entirely. But so there are waterproof enclosures that would be safe to put archival storage into, in terms of that they're an inert plastic, like, if they're polypropylene or polyethylene or whatever, like they are a safe plastic to use. But if it's creating a sealed environment, that is creating an environment with a potential for moisture to grow mold. So what I would really recommend is maybe storage with like making sure that I already said don't do the attic or the basement, but making sure the items are not stored on the floor. So if there's any flooding concerns, that wouldn't be a risk. And then if there's a potential for leaking, also having like a layer of protection between that. So either plastic sheeting or another like impermeable shelf or something. But I would be hesitant to recommend to put them in their own enclosed plastic.
Yeah. As someone who grew up in the New Orleans area and, went through Katrina, among other hurricanes, how do I phrase this? I would suggest to people, when you're first organizing your stuff, try to put all the priority things together in a place where if you do need to evacuate, you can't bring it all with you. You got all kinds of other things you need to bring with you, right? But if you do need to bring something with you, have a go box, so to speak, of these are the things most important that I cannot lose. Everything else, like, I hate to prioritize my stuff like that, but if it comes down to it, if you want to save your wedding album, save your wedding album. But having it already put together in a way like that, when you live in an area where you can be hit by natural disaster, that can save you a little bit of, at least a smidge of stress in an already very stressful situation. So that's what my kind of additional personal thoughts are.
I think that's a great tip.
Okay. So as far as some other questions we got in here, somebody was asking, can you use regular copy paper for interleaving in a pinch? Like, could you do that?
I would not recommend that because regular copy paper is not going to be acid and lignin free. And so it could potentially do more damage. If you can confirm that the copy paper you're using is, then I would say it's not regular copy paper anymore. But so when we're talking about archival bond paper, that is what we're referring to, is essentially like copy paper, but that is acid and lignin free. So yeah, I would say you could do more harm than good by interleaving with that material, and it would probably be better to not interleave at all until you well, I would say actually you just shouldn't store the items that way, but I would wait until you had the proper paper to interleave with before doing that.
Cool. Okay. So we still have like 45 questions in here.
Oh my goodness.
Almost out of time. Oh, okay. I'm seeing a question in the Q&A, not the Q&A, the chat, I should say, that I do want to address. Is using fireproof box good for documents? No, it is not, friends. It creates its own little ecosystem in there.
Right.
Mold, all the mold. Don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so like the fireproof box is good for documents that you need like for life, like
Yeah,
the
like your
deed to,
mortgage.
right, yeah, the deed to your house, your
Yeah,
social security card, but like something of historical significance, no, that's not what you want to put in the fireproof box because of the
yeah,
same thing that we were talking about with the plastic. If you want to put archival storage in a plastic tote, again, you are then creating a new microclimate, which could be creating a humid environment. So yeah, not good.
okay. So we still have a lot of questions in here, but I'm gonna kind of wrap up with two final questions. Uh, First being, is there a way to store like movies, like film like that, not necessarily negatives, but also negatives?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're talking about when you're saying film. I know, Gaylord Archival has options for like film reels,
Yeah.
microfilm, VHS tapes. Something important to note with VHS is that nothing will stop the degradation of magnetic tape. So with like VHS tapes or audio cassette tapes, which use magnetic tape, they will always eventually deteriorate. You'll start to see the static and stuff when you play them. So you really want to digitize them as soon as you possibly can. So you're doing it while they're in the best condition that they can be. But still putting them in archival storage does create that microclimate we were just talking about, which will at least slow that deterioration, but it cannot fully prevent it. But films, yeah, we have lots of film canisters. We have boxes for film storage. There are lots of options for that. And I believe there are some resources on it too in the research center.
Final question. Somebody was asking about that discount code. Can you use that more than once?
You can use it more than once. So figure out all your preservation projects and feel free to use it through the end of this year.
Great.
But yeah, and it especially if you go to gaylord.com/YourStory, that section of our website is specifically curated for for people like you, genealogists, family historians. So what we tried to do with that collection was take those products that, our cultural institutions are using, but put them together in kits to make it a little bit easier for you to figure out exactly what you need to preserve certain items. So it's the same stuff that we're selling individually to museums and archives, but we've just assembled it together for you to make it a little easier. So I mentioned a few different kits during the presentation today. One thing I didn't mention during the document storage that I think would be helpful is we have a family history kit, which kind of allows you to store both documents and like some newspaper clippings or photos. It kind of is like an all-in-one thing. And we also have a family archives kit, and that it's basically a way to get you like a box and some folders and some sleeves to store a certain number of documents just to get you started. So definitely look at the YourStory section of the website to find helpful products to help you with your preservation journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you for such a wonderful program.
You're
People are very
welcome.
excited. They have many questions, a lot of people getting some ideas for things, which is always great. And
Awesome.
and thank everybody for joining us. If you guys have additional questions, like I said, feel free to send us an email, which our email is genealogy@acpl.info. If you'd like a copy of the chat, also send us an email. And you can also email Ariel as well with additional questions. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
definitely.
I hope all of you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again, Ariel.
Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone who attended.
Bye.
Bye.